everybody. This is Ashley with SurrogateFirst, and I have the honor of hosting this webinar where we will be talking about mental health support and supporting of the individual and the group relationship. I wanted to start off the webinar by just sharing a little bit about our process, about all that we have to offer as an agency, kind of going over everything we will be doing. I'm also just making sure that I've hit all the right buttons so that Joey can come on. Sometimes our system or human error occurs. So we'll be discussing this webinar about the common challenges in the building of relationships through the surrogacy process. We'll be understanding each other's perspectives, establishing and maintaining healthy boundaries, tips for starting your surrogacy journey, and handling and resolving relationship challenges. I will be just kind of discussing a little bit more about Joey Guzman. We have been working with him for quite a few years. He is one of the leading mental health professionals, just has the most amazing, caring heart when it comes to surrogates and parents. And so I am so excited to be able to welcome you, Joey. Maybe you could share a little bit about yourself and what brought you to the mental health field of surrogacy.
Awesome. Well, Ashley, it's a pleasure to see you always. Thank you for having me on today. So everyone, my name is Joey Guzman Cuffle, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I am not just a therapist, I'm also a two-time dad through surrogacy. So I have two daughters that were born through surrogacy. The same gestational carrier helped me and my husband have our children. And although I was already in the mental health field prior to my surrogacy journey, it was really my initial journey with my first daughter that really motivated me to transition from practicing in, treatment centers with, attending to severe mental health to transitioning to practicing in mental health for third-party reproduction and infertility. It was my own experience, experience in my consultation with the mental health provider that interviewed me that really just alerted me to things that were lacking that I thought were important to share with other people. And so this is what brought me to the field of surrogacy.
I love that. And you guys are a whole family affair at your practice, and you guys continue to grow more and more. I see that you keep introducing us to more amazing mental health professionals that are coming through and getting to be educated by you and seeing your practice. I know for my clients, anyone who's ever done a consult with you has always said like, oh, that was so great. It was so educational. They find value in their time with you. So we really thank you for that. As an intended parent, did you struggle with some of the topics we're going to talk about, or did you see that with like maybe your surrogate struggling too?
As an intended parent, there was definitely struggles, and I will share this that having gone through surrogacy, I prefer to be the mental health provider than the intended parent because there are some things that are just very real for when we're going through this process, and a lot of challenges for sure. So I did struggle with some things, yes.
Awesome. Well, I would love to be able to kind of get into that, like not your struggles, but things that we can share with clients. So maybe you could kind of let us know what are some common challenges in building those relationships that you see through these appointments with the intended parents and the surrogate separate, and then those group sessions. What are some things that are common that come up?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. So the common theme that I see in my practice when I meet with intended parents and gestational carriers and understanding what their journey is like for them is, the struggle with building a relationship. How do we go about building a relationship? And the thing is, this is such a unique process. When you are going through the screening and matching process, it's such a very unique but also rapid process because you are meeting with a gestational carrier for a match meeting. And although you've already been presented with a profile, you know a little bit about her and her family, perhaps, you're set up, to meet with her, and you go through this meeting, and it's about an hour and a half long. And during that time frame, you have to cover a lot of material, a lot of topics that are so crucial and important for the surrogacy, journey and in the process. And it leaves very little time to really talk about the expectations around the relationship or diving in deep so that you can get an understanding of how you both feel about this process or what you're really looking, for in terms of the relationship moving forward. Maybe you skim the surface, but you don't really get into it. And so, once you've decided to move forward with a gestational carrier and intended parent after that meeting, um, I've understood that some agencies have a guideline of you can't have any communication until after legal has been completed, and so that kind of leaves you with not being able to communicate and have those follow-up questions. So it's almost like speed dating. You have to really, get a sense for that person in that 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, agree to work with them, and then wait until afterwards to continue building a rapport. And so, sometimes that might leave you to have some awkwardness because you don't know how to start the conversations or how to address certain things. And maybe you didn't fully talk about the expectations, in that match meeting. And so now you're starting to learn that maybe there's some differing things that you didn't expect to have. And so that process in itself can make it difficult and challenging to build a relationship with the intended parent or the surrogate. Just that lack of communication or maybe establishing the expectations prior to. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I always explain to parents and surrogates, it's like married at first sight, but instead we're going to have a baby. So it's like, this has been arranged. You have your matchmaker. And then it's like, okay, do you like me? I like you. Well, we're going to have a baby together. And you're like, okay, but I don't even know these people.
Exactly.
And so that same thought process of like, we're working towards the same goal. And so we, like that, sometimes that can overcome a lot of the small things with, with relationships and personalities. And in that match meeting, everyone's trying to give that best experience, right? Like, we want to be best friends and we're going to talk all the time, or we're not going to talk at all, or whatever it is. And no one's been through, unless they've been an experienced surrogate or intended parent, they don't know how they're going to feel. They don't know what the experiences are going to be like, or what fears they have, or what expectations they have on others. Like, it's a pretty intense relationship, and so everyone really needs to be fully committed before jumping into surrogacy, because it's going to test your commitment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, it's such a unique, complex, but also like rapid process when you're matching and getting into this arranged setup,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, as a parent and as also a mental health professional, what are some things that you would share with surrogates about coming from that side? As we've never dealt with infertility, we've never needed a surrogate to have a baby. We don't understand this, what brings parents to truly. We have never walked in their shoes. But what are some things that you could share potentially from what you've seen in your practice and personally that could help surrogates to maybe understand a little bit more about that side, and also maybe have a little bit more empathy and a little bit more patience sometimes when maybe parents get a little, like excited,
Sure. Yes. I think, most importantly, something to consider, for the gestational carrier to consider when you're working with an intended parent is, we have been on this journey for a long time. There's, a lot of couples and individuals who have experienced reproductive trauma, who this is the alternative way to be able to grow their family. A lot of us have just, have struggled to get to this point to be able to have a child through surrogacy. So trying to be empathetic towards what their experience is, maybe asking them about what their history is so that you can learn about that and understand, the type of pain that they've been through, or the type of struggles that they've encountered, in building their family. Understanding that we're definitely going to be anxious and unaware of a lot of things. So, a lot of us maybe haven't experienced pregnancy before, and so we don't know what that may be like. And so we might have a lot of questions and again, a lot of anxiety. And it's also important to understand that we have a lack of control. That a lot of our anxiety can come from that, a lack of control of not having the pregnancy be in our own home or being present on a day-to-day basis. Like we're not seeing it all the time. And so, when you're coming into a quick arrangement and matching and entrusting someone and carrying your child, there could be a lot of anxiety there because everything can feel rushed. And then all of a sudden we have to form this trust, and there's anxiety there. So a
Oh
lack of
yeah.
control. So sometimes, we may come off as like they're being too pushy, or maybe, they just are, they're asking too many questions. And again, it's just a lot of us have been through a lot, and there's a lot that we don't know. And we're just trying to figure this out as we're going along through this process. And so, understanding that the lack of control can contribute to the anxiety, the fear, and all of the things that, may be coming out, behavior wise.
Yeah, I definitely, being in this field for gosh, now probably 9 years. It's been
Mhm.
a long time. I'm like a grandma in this field. Um, I've noticed too that there can be a mourning for some parents of not being able to carry their own child. I've also seen, I work with a medical provider to give coaching for parents, and I had one intended parent book an appointment with me and just be heartbroken because what had happened was they were waiting for the results of like if it's a pregnancy or not. And their surrogate said, okay, well, I'm going to test. Are you okay with me testing? They said, yes, that's fine. They knew she was testing, but she didn't say anything. On her
Mm,
end, she was preparing for the most beautiful surprise, like, we're pregnant. On the other end, mom who had dealt with many miscarriages was thinking, it's another miscarriage. She
yeah.
doesn't want to tell me. She doesn't want to talk to me. She's worried about this. Mom gets busy with her life and she's trying to plan this surprise thing. And so several days go by, and when the surrogate finally, she like mailed something out, it was going to come in and they'd open it up. By the time they got it, the mom had been through such an emotional wreck of thinking it was another failed transfer that she didn't react on FaceTime the way the surrogate had took all this time
Yeah.
to make something so special. And so the surrogate got upset, like, you're not thankful to me. I don't want a relationship. And the mom's like, I'm so sorry. Like, I failed at the reaction, but I was going through this. And I think sometimes as surrogates, I'm not going to put everything on surrogates, but sometimes as surrogates, we need to understand that most of our parents have sacrificed time and money and their hearts, and I've seen people refinance homes, take out their 401ks, take second jobs, deal with multiple losses or failed transfers, or whatever that is. They're coming sometimes a little brokenhearted and cautious. And as surrogates, we're thinking we want to do the best, we want to give you all this attention, information. But had we had maybe a group session, right? Where, had they had a group session where they could talk about, like, what are you comfortable with when it comes to testing or surprises or mementos? Because maybe not all parents want
Yes.
to have a memory because they're so fearful there's going to be a loss, and
Yes.
maybe surrogates can keep those till the very end when we know we've made it through. Or, so those are conversations that agencies may not be asking, but in a group situation, you guys can ask those questions to really, and even maybe give them time to think about it because they may
Yes.
not thought about it.
Yeah. So that actually kind of goes back to like when you're doing your match meetings, right? When we're all doing the match meetings, like you don't go into all of those things. And so then afterwards you don't even know what to ask, and you don't get into these types of conversations of like, what does it look like if, we aren't successful in this process? How do we both want to be supported in that process? Do we place a phone call? Do we not place a phone call? Do you need space to process it? And then you reach out, or, is it okay to send mementos, or, how does it work out, in terms of pregnancy testing? Are you okay with this or not? Or even sharing stories on social media? Like all of that's not talked about. And the only way to know about this is to ask questions. And I think, it is important to give the surrogate and the intended parents, at this agency level or at the fertility clinic, when you're reviewing, what are the steps that are being followed to allow for a group session to happen. It is one of the standard guidelines in that have been set forth by ASRM, and they're very valuable, and it can give you more insight as to how you both perceive things in terms of loss and grief, and understanding where this person has been or that person has been. It just gives you like an added you know it gives you added insight as to who you're going to be working with. And it can also be like an icebreaker, even more so than the initial, like, match meeting that you did, because now the mental health provider can assist in navigating the conversation or asking the questions that maybe they're not asking, that then gets them to have the conversation that they're supposed to be having. So they understand what the expectations are, where they're at, what do the boundaries look like, what does communication look like. One of the big things for me too is getting the intended parents and the gestational carrier to look at the possibility of when things don't go smoothly. We all are going into this optimistically, but we also have to consider, what does it look like when, things don't go the way that we want? Because I think that's where a lot of the times, there could be a lot of misinterpretation of things. And so we want to make sure that we understand how we feel about, again, loss and grief, and how do we want to be supported. I do meet with a lot of folks who, when they don't have success in their process, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should reach out to them. Should I reach out to her? I don't know. It's so awkward. I'm just going to maybe ignore it until they call me. And then everyone's kind of, going through this process where they're creating these narratives, and that those narratives are creating anxiety, and that can harm the relationship process. So having that open communication and understanding where everyone is so vital to this whole process. This is a relational experience, and just like in any relationship, we need communication and we need to understand each other.
Yeah. I tell parents that all the time. I know as an agency, we're talking process and timelines and money, but I need you to understand this is not transactional. This is relational. Like, I've never had a parent at the very end of a journey say, well, that was transactional, compared to, at least with our agency, compared to like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how relational, I didn't realize how bonding, or how this would, this would affect all of our lives, for time, to come. And so I think it's important, like this. I've never seen a video like this webinar, talking about this. And I think it's so important. We need to talk about these items, because at the heart of what we're doing, like, at least for me as a surrogate, it wasn't the compensation. I did it because I wanted the experience of helping a family, have their child. And it was really important to me to have a relationship and be to an organic friendship, and so and I think a lot of surrogates, I'd say 85% of surrogates come in and they're like, I want to have a relationship. And we're like, okay, well, let's figure that out. Let's find a family that also wants that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
What are
that's the other thing is, like, there are different types of relationships, and so you can find the right fit that meets the right criteria in terms of what you're expecting in that relationship. And so, yeah, there's different relationships, and there's a right fit for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. I'm probably got some pretty low standards. I don't talk to my best friends on a weekly basis. So like, to me, I'm like, good friendship means we just, we check in every now and then,
Yeah. And I think that, at the beginning, our relationships, and maybe you can, share a little bit about your experience, but it can be intense in terms of, like, we're going back and forth, we're texting each other, and it's just like so new, and it's just very bonding, but the communication is probably more often than once, you've completed the journey. I know that I have such a great connection, with the gestational carrier that assisted me not just once, but twice. I consider her a friend, a family friend. But do I text her every day now? No. So she has been amazing. And she's, when we first, started our journey, she was a flight attendant. And she is now a pilot. So she's constantly busy flying around. And so we don't text as much anymore, but I think it's to be expected. Like, we all just kind of go into our lives. I'm now busy, raising two girls, and so they take up a lot of the time. And so we do text, here and there, and communicate with one another. We support each other on our Facebook posts and those types of things. But the communication, it's also expected that it sort of withers out a little bit.
Yeah. And speaking that, definitely this is a question I had further down, but I think this is the right time to talk about it, is what does that relationship look like? And what are some tips you might have for parents and surrogates at that delivery stage? You're leading up to it as a surrogate and a parent, and you're talking a lot because you're like, are you in labor? Are you, and all of that's going on, right? And that ends with delivery. And now parents have a newborn that they have to keep alive and take care of and love, and they're exhausted, and the surrogate has just delivered. I know for ourselves at SurrogateFirst, we started a public fourth trimester group for our surrogates. So it's open to independent, any agency. There's someone who meets, twice a month on there to just let people, share their birth stories and share those types of things. But as a surrogate, we've had all this attention and ooh and ah, and you're amazing, you're pregnant, and then it's done, and then we're just kind of frumpy, and we've got these pregnancy hormones, and parents aren't talking as much because they've got a newborn. Like, do you have any tips, or maybe you can share a little bit about that awkward stage right after birth, before parents come up for air and surrogates hormones kind of balance out?
Yeah, you know what? It's kind of just taking me back to like what my experience was. So I remember what it was to be at the delivery room and have that whole birthing process come. And although I was very much in awe of what's going on, and I was able to receive, my daughter, and it was so in that moment, part of me was also very much feed on like, how is she feeling and what is she going through? And so when I would look at her, she's like, no, focus on yourself. I'm gonna be okay.
Love that.
Come to me once you're like done with the all the oohs and the ahs, and I'm gonna be here. And I love that she did that because it gave me permission to really just focus on what was going on in front of me, which was my family that I
Your
had been
baby.
longing for a long time, right? And so I love that she did that. But once, my husband and I had our time with their baby, our bonding and learning about all these things, we were able to go to her room, check in on her, and just kind of talk about like what happened here. Oh my gosh. And just kind of like recapping on our journey from day one and the struggles that we had to that day. And so I think, as far as tips, I think it's just being mindful that this is such a very relational and human experience. And oh, there's an amazing thing going on in front of us. We also just want to be mindful of all of us who were involved. She was very aware of like what were my needs, which is to focus on your family. And I was aware of like, how is she doing? And I want to make sure that she knows how much we appreciate her and that this isn't just like done, and showing her that appreciation. you know we so our daughters were born in Colorado. She was located in Colorado, and so we ended up staying, a week in Colorado. And during that time, we were constantly in communication. I was, touching, base with her, checking in on how she was doing. But she really just let me know, like, I know why I was doing this, and the
Yeah.
purpose for this. So you don't have to check in on me. But my heart and my mind was like, I still want to show you gratitude, and I want to make sure that you know that we value you and that we want you to be in our lives. So I guess it's just healthy tips. It's just being mindful of everyone involved, and we all have emotions. And being a man and not understanding what it's like to have the hormones, kind of regulate and go back to baseline, and how difficult and challenging that can be for a female. I was just very mindful of that, and I was just like, hey, whatever you need, let us know. I think it'd be okay just to check in with your surrogate and say, what do you need from us to be able to support you in this, you know, second part or third part of
Yeah.
our journey together, which is after the birth, and allowing her to be able to think about it and then share that with you. And I think once you know what her needs are, then great. Then now you can meet her needs by doing exactly what she's asked you to do because she's telling you directly. So being able to
Yeah.
listen to each other and understand what the needs are after the birth.
I love that. I mean, I know honestly, I've seen, at least in my field, that the surrogates that are blessed enough to see the parents meet their baby when the child is born, they are able to have closure so much quicker than I've seen, and emergencies happen, and babies come early. And I think for me too, like my first one, my intended mom wasn't there to meet the baby because baby came early. Um, and so I was like, I'm sticking next to this baby till that mom comes. Like, I committed, and so we had talked about it. But that moment she met her baby was the most special, experience. I remember her just running up to baby and saying, like, I've waited forever for you, and I'm gonna love you. And I just thought, like, that's what it's about. Like, that gave me the high that became the addiction of forced surrogacies, right? But it was just, that's what we are here for as surrogates, you know? We get, I feel like I'm just as blessed as my intended parents. I was blessed with the experience and the relationships and the compensation that helped my family so much too. Like they, you know, they blessed my family just as much as I was able to bless them by being able to carry their child, that I physically could do that and keep them safe. So I think, you know, like you said, it's about communicating. I'm not too needy, but I do love that my intended mom, you know, was there to be like, hey, you okay? And I'm like, thanks, you know, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
good, you know. And we did it a little different. So I nursed in the hospital. So, you know, she's bringing baby by and latching them on. And sometimes I was exhausted. I'm like, you're going to hold your own baby on at this point. Like, I'm tired, but you know, we still had that like kind of closure to go with it. So I do love that you know, both sides thinking about that. And I personally feel as surrogates, we have to remember that. Like, we have to remember that this is the first meeting that our parents are having with their baby. And just like we got to have that uninterrupted time of holding and looking at our own children, we've got to be able to do that. And sometimes that means just stepping aside from our initial, you know, Mimi, to going, hey, this is what the parents need. This is the bonding time they need. Now, if those parents come back and they're like, we are exhausted the next day, and you're like, you want to go take a nap, that's fine, right? But like, it's important we remember too as surrogates. And I think sometimes in this field we're in currently, it's very surrogate centered. And sometimes it gets forgotten that we have parents here who have sacrificed so much and went through so much, that they need to be loved, and they need to be, you know, they need to have too their thoughts and what they're going through as part of ours. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I see it in the groups that sometimes it's about, oh, your parents, I can't believe they would say that. But why did the parents say that? Like, were they fearful? Were they scared? Maybe it's a cultural thing and they misunderstood, you know. And my heart goes out to parents to think like, you don't have any of this control over this whole process. I always tell my parents, I would be the worst intended parent because I have so much control issues. I'm amazing for your agency because I have control issues. I would not be a good intended parent. They have to trust us and they have to believe in us. They have to trust an agency. They have to trust an escrow.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times parents have so many unknowns.
Yeah.
And so keeping that in mind as surrogates, I feel like we should have empathy towards our parents, and we should have thankfulness in our hearts too, because I don't know, for me, I felt thankful that my parents chose me. And then I was thankful that I was blessed enough to carry this pregnancy when it wasn't a failed transfer. And so I tried to give that to my parent in that thankfulness, that it's not only you being thankful for me, but I'm thankful for my family, you
Yeah.
know?
I definitely think that it is a process where we all need to have gratitude for each other and empathy for each other. I think it's very important, just as the surrogate, to be able to understand the intended parent's journey and again, whatever reproductive traumas they've experienced, or unsuccessful transfers, or whatever the journey may have been, and putting themselves in their shoes. It's also important for us as the intended parents to be able to do so the same with the gestational carrier, because there's also a lack of control for you too, you
Yeah.
know, because you probably there's restrictions around things that you can or cannot do depending on your legal contract or just the things that you've agreed to. But while you're pregnant, this is somebody else's pregnancy, and you probably aren't doing the same things that you were doing with your own pregnancy. There's might be some restrictions around travel or how you do things, and that might not be easy for you, for 9-10 months, or that might be a struggle. And also, being pregnant, I think, in general, like, you have lack of control of your body because you're growing another human being
Yeah.
in your uterus. And so there's a lot of lack of control for you too, as there is for the intended parents. And so again, it's about empathy and being able to walk or try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. And I think that is really what kind of establishes this sense of trust, and of course communication and all these other things that are important to be able to have hopefully a smooth journey and build a nice and solid relationship.
If an intended parent or a surrogate starts to feel a breakdown in the relationship, or maybe even the agency notices a breakdown in communication of the relationship, maybe one party doesn't want to communicate with the other one, or maybe we even catch it earlier on, what are some good steps and what are some good tips that you have for that, if any party in this notices that there starts to be a breakdown of the relationship.
Yeah, I've heard this quite often, and and I've had people come into my practice, to talk about things where they gets challenging, like, and what I've noticed is that both parties are scared to voice out their opinion or their thoughts. They don't want to hurt the other person's feelings, and there's a lot of assumptions, a lot of assuming going on, which can contribute to the anxiety that one experiences. Sometimes these assumptions are flawed, and they're not based on reality. And so I always, think about, like, just in any relationship, you want to, number one, reality check your thoughts. Like, okay, what is this based on, and why am I feeling this way? What am I telling myself? Because our thoughts influence our emotions, which then influence, how we behave. So understanding, it's reality checking with yourself. And I think it's always okay to have, a conversation with your gestational carrier or the intended parents about what you're thinking. Um,
Yeah.
nothing is dumb or stupid or anything like that. Like, everything is valid. Your emotions are valid. Everything, it is valid. And so, for example, for me in my journey, so even though I've traveled quite a bit, like, I'm very afraid of flying. And the surrogate that we were working with was a flight attendant. So she was on the airplane all the time. Right. And so there was a lot of anxiety there for me. Yeah, I fell into, like, oh my gosh, this is so stupid. I can't ask for this. And so I felt myself kind of like not being open about the things that were concerning for me. But at some point I was like, okay, I just have to approach this in a way where, I feel comfortable. And I think that when you're afraid to confront something, it's okay to approach something with curiosity, like
Yeah.
being able to ask a question like, hey, listen, this might sound silly, but, I'm curious, like, how does this work? Because it makes me feel really anxious when this happens. Like, what do you think about that? I think that's a nice way to break with the ice around the topic. And just be able to start that conversation. Once I allowed myself to ask questions, to not be afraid to address things that were concerning for me, it just, I was like, oh, it went well. Like, she responded well to my question, and she was able to give me information that made me, think of things differently and reduce my anxiety. It is okay to ask questions, and it is okay to feel fearful about certain things. But you want to identify, why am I afraid? Because maybe it's more about what you're telling yourself. She's going to react negatively. Well, we don't know that. Or they're going to react negatively. It's okay to just check in and ask. And if it gets complicated to even to get to that point, this is where, you reach out to your agency and have them, hopefully support, both parties in being able to have that difficult conversation. Or this is when maybe a mental health provider comes in to help them navigate a conversation. So I think if there's a breakdown, we want to understand, like, what is going on, first of all, and, how can that be resolved. I do think that when relationships start to break down, like, there is hope to repair them. Because, I mean, if you think about all the relationships that we're in, whether if it's with family or friends or our spouses, significant others, there's breakdowns at every point, and they can be resolved. And so too with this relationship in surrogacy, that can also be repaired. And so, but we want to be able to identify this early so that, we can have that positive outcome.
Yeah. And it's okay not to agree, And so
Absolutely.
I think sometimes as a people pleaser, I didn't want to disappoint my intended parents. Like you
Mm,
said, as a surrogate, oh, my surrogate pregnancy is way more stressful than my own kids. Cause my own kids, I'm like, they'll be fine. Right. But with this baby, I was like, oh, there's people counting on me. And like, I went to the doctor way more than I did with any of my other babies, or, had my nurse friends come over to check for heartbeats. Cause I was like, I didn't feel them kick. So I definitely think that, it is important for us to understand, like, hey, we're going to have misunderstandings, and we're going to have, some communication issues. And a lot of times if the parents are international, or maybe the surrogate prefers text messages, there's no tone, there's no pitch, and text messages can come off however the person reads it. And so
exactly.
I find we get a lot of miscommunications and issues, and we're like, hey, well, hold on, let's find out what we really meant by that, and then it's like completely opposite of what what was thought about it. So I do like that your conversations about the communication. When parents and surrogates are starting off, is there any topics they should maybe steer away from, like you would in dating? You know, there's sometimes you don't just come right out and be like, oh, here's my list of like, things that you should be aware of, or, and not meaning, be aware of as like a danger, but, you know, should they be talking about those no list of political things and their full religious beliefs, or, is that something that should be right there at the beginning?
That's an interesting question. I don't think I've been asked that before.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I think like in anything, like we want to read the room and we want to understand like what is appropriate in conversation at the time, right? For example, like if we're having a match meeting, well, maybe I don't know. I don't know if that is
Yeah.
the right place to talk about what your political views are. Maybe I don't know. Maybe not. Considering the time frame
Climate.
that you have, right? But like I do think that if that is really important for you, you know, these beliefs that we may have, I think what I would say the tip would be is you want to share this upfront early on, with your agency, so that your agency has an idea of what this is for you and how important it is, so that when they are trying to figure out best matches, that they're able to find candidates, who may have the same beliefs, and that way it's okay.
Yeah.
And then, that way also it may take away from the stresses of having these conversations with, your surrogate or the intended parents. I mean, what happens if you find out later that you're, see things differently? I mean, is that going to really hurt the relationship? So I think that, maybe these things, it might be helpful to screen out like at the beginning during like, when you're applying to be a surrogate or you're coming to an agency, for the program. That way, those things could be filtered out. That way, so they could leave you really to the important things of like trust and right and like communications, setting expectations and boundaries, so that you can have a healthy relationship and a smooth journey.
Awesome. Now, like in a first date, who texts who and who doesn't? And I mean, I know for surrogates, I'm always telling them like, you can make the first move.
Yeah.
Like because a lot of times for me, the parents are so worried, like, she's willing to do this for me. I don't want to interrupt her life more. I don't want to irritate her. I don't want to stress her out, And I'm like, no, the surrogate wants you to call her, it's the night after, like call her and see how she's doing,
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
say about that? Like,
Well, you see, I think going kind of back to like what where we started off is like, in that match meeting, right? Like hopefully there's space to talk about like what does communication look like, and can I text you? Is it okay to text you? I think that's one of the I think there was for me, there was all these topics that we reviewed, but I was relational minded. And so I was like putting in the questions in between topics, like, well, is it okay if I text you? Is it okay if I call you? Like, how do you feel about like, just me randomly texting you? Or, is it okay to just reach out to you, or do you want it to be very scheduled where I only reach out to you, once a week? Because I would prefer if we didn't do that,
yeah,
and so that got me to understand what her comfort level was. And she was like, you can text me anytime, whenever you want, you can call me, I'm here for you. And so again, there, by me just asking those questions, like she gave me permission. And so once she gave me that permission, the funny thing is that I didn't text her all the time, I didn't call her all the time, but I felt comfortable texting her on a random Sunday or Tuesday just to check in to see how she was doing, and didn't feel like I was intruding or being intrusive. But also I was mindful, she has a family, she has work, so she's probably flying. So I don't know her flying schedule, but like if I don't hear back from her, she's probably on a flight and she's gonna get back to me when she gets back to me, right? So we also kind of have to slow down and
yeah.
be like, give people space to respond. Like, don't let our thoughts kind of like take us to places where we're going to get anxiety that might lead me to send 100 text messages when that 15-minute window or whatever it is that I had from when I texted her.
Going
Like,
down, she ran away.
yeah, you just, so understanding these things up front again, and this is where I think that's why it might be challenging to build a relationship, is because none of these things have been, established at the beginning, because it's such a rapid
Yeah.
process when you're matching. And so then you're trying to figure things out, and that's when the group consultation can come in and can be beneficial by establishing again, what does communication look like? what's too much, what's too little, like what are you comfortable with? So it's really important to establish all of these expectations again and boundaries like very early on with the help of the providers to kind of give them that, like easy like platform to stand on so that they can continue to build.
Yeah, I love that. I think all of these have been amazing. Is there anything that you have, when you're preparing for this meeting that you wanted to share that I wasn't, that I didn't ask a question about?
No, no. I mean, I think you address some pretty important things that we all need to be aware of. I love that we looked at, what do GCs need to think about in terms of the IPs and the IPs in terms of the agent, the GCs. And I think that is something that's very important to consider is like, again, where have these both parties been and understanding, what they've gone through, trying to be in their shoes, understanding that both parties have a lack of control. And if anything is coming off a certain way, we want to think about, oh, maybe they're anxious because they don't get to see the pregnancy every day. They don't know exactly what I'm doing every day. They must have had a hard time. Maybe they've worked with two surrogates and then they were unsuccessful, and I'm the third surrogate, and so maybe they're just more hyper,
Yeah.
vigilant to what's going on. And so just kind of understanding these things, and that sometimes things aren't always about us. It's like, it's maybe about
What?
what they're going through.
Yeah. I'm a lifelong maintenance, therapy lover. So definitely understand, and I think people need to understand how important mental health support is during this entire journey. Like, it doesn't mean your relationship is failing, doesn't mean any of that. But can you guys, people who are watching, like, imagine being able to talk to Joey or his team, and something that could seem so big could be just something simple behind it, and some other perspective, and that's what I try to remind myself is like, their perspective is how they grew up and what they've been through. And so like we could be looking at the same situation and see it completely different. And so
That's true.
uh, having that middle person, so especially if you are independent, or maybe your agency is not as hands-on, it is really important that from the very beginning, before you even start legal and any of that, get connected to a mental health professional who could be able to, have your group support, the individual, and then even, a couple appointments during second trimester, third, or maybe even postpartum. I know for myself, I've always done a postpartum counseling sessions, including my family, so that we could make sure that my children had closure, my husband had some
Yeah.
closure, maybe mommy was hormonal and a little mean. So let's like kind of get all of that together, and also their closure of Auntie Andy and baby's going home. I'm allowed to use her name because she's like cool with it. But so normally I want to say a parent's name, but getting to see all of that. Mental health does not mean you're weak. It does not mean that you've done something wrong. It just is so beneficial with the right support, and so I thank you. I love what you're doing. I love the heart you have. You really are just such a special gem to our field. And I know you've worked your butt off to get to exactly where you are here, and you haven't given up. So I really do appreciate you coming with all your responsibilities you have, coming to share with us on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely, Ash. It's always a pleasure to work with you, to meet with you, to hear what you have to say. You also bring a lot, to our community here, and we learn a lot from your experiences. And I love what you just mentioned in terms of like, the mental health aspect, because it is very important, and mental health support is for everyone. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. I mean, that nothing has to be going wrong
Yeah.
to be able to have support. It's for everyone, for every reason. And I love that you guys also focus on this fourth trimester and having that closure. Closure is so important. And it's not just, again, it's not just the surrogate and the intended parents. It's also the family of the gestational carrier, their kids. You talked about closure, and everybody deserves to have their closure. And sometimes that's not an area of focus. And it's not just about Ashley getting her closure, but it's also your kids and your spouse, because they're on the journey with you.
Yeah.
So having that is also, something that's really important. You want to make sure that everyone on this journey together gets that closure.
Yeah. Well, we
Yeah.
love you so much. Thank you for
Thank you,
your
Ashley.
time. And thank you to whoever's watching out there on our lives. We appreciate all of you guys. If you need a way to get a hold of myself or, you know, with Joey and his team, I'm going to just share my screen real quick so we can get you over to the right page. Let's hope. I am not technology savvy. Look at Joey. There he is.
Oh.
And then here's what we got. So reach out to me, Ashley at surrogatefirst.com. Our 1-800 number is 833-99-BLESS. And then you have Joey's team. Go to the website. It is so helpful. There is information on there. You can connect with all of the different providers. You'll see what the services are. And I'm sure that you have a great experience with counseling with Joey and his associates. So we thank you guys all. Have a great day.
Bye.